Kannaland Municipality in the Western Cape is marred in controversy after convicted child rapist Jeffrey Donson was re-elected as mayor. Donson was convicted for the rape of a 15-year-old girl in 2004 while still mayor. His conviction wasn't overturned and his sentence reduced to a wholly suspended term of imprisonment, correctional supervision and a 20,000 rand fine, as well as rehabilitation program for sex offenders. While as a deputy, Werner Meshwa, who in 2012 was a teacher and head of a department at the Excelsior Primary School in Calisdorp, was fired for sexual misconduct with a pupil. Earlier this year, Meshwa, while Speaker of the Kannaland Council, was convicted of fraud and obstruction of justice. Both municipal leaders are from the Independent Civic Organisation of South Africa. The election of the two comes at a time when South Africa struggles to grapple with gender-based violence and rape crisis. If those guilty of sex crimes are put in leadership positions, how confident can we be that government is doing all it can to curb GBV and rape in the country? To unpack this, we are joined by the Director of Rise-Up Against GBV Director, Mandisa Khanyile. Mandisa, very good morning. I've just walked through critical issues around the appointment of these two individuals. How does that leave, where does it leave you rather? What are your thoughts as a GBV proponent?
Firstly, to say I'm disappointed would probably be like the understatement of the year. It's actually quite disgusting that when we submitted 24 demands on the 1st of August 2018, the first of those demands was that there should never ever be a person who is elected or appointed into a leadership position in this country that has a GBV offense. And so for us, this is a huge slap in the face, because not only was that in the 24 demands, it then went into the Summit Declaration on the 1st and 2nd of November 2018, and then found its way onto the National Strategic Plan for Gender-Based Violence and Femicide. And it's actually under the pillar for accountability that this is something that we don't want to see. Because if you remember also previously, we had a situation where an entire deputy minister had to resign on his own accord, and I'm referring to Duduzi Manana in this regard, after being found guilty of assault against those two women. And I'm trying to say that there's a precedent here that has been created where, look, we'll let it slide for a little bit, maybe you can come back. We'll suspend you for a little bit, maybe you'll come back. But there aren't any real life consequences for perpetrators of gender-based violence. Imagine you're an entire convicted rapist, and worse, you raped a minor, a 15-year-old child, and yet you are able to still serve public office in this country and be a representative of an entire municipality. It's absolutely appalling.
You know, I suppose I'm a little bit as flabbergasted as you are. But the question I'd like to ask obviously is around the acceptance of Jeffrey Donson by his colleagues, right, who are fully conversant with the details of his past, which is rape of a minor, a 15-year-old, a child.
The reality is it shows the rape culture that we exist in this country, the fact that communities welcome back rapists, the fact that people who offend don't really see consequences, as I mentioned before. I mean, if we talk about the fact that in this country alone, we saw the teenage pregnancy rates. We've seen the recent crime stats, the rise in sexual offenses. In South Africa, on average, we don't ever do less than 50,000 sexual offenses per annum. And as we look at the rates currently, it looks like we're definitely headed in that direction even on this year. That's through lockdowns. That's through people being trapped in their homes. That's through all of it. We still commit sexual offenses, and we still commit sexual offenses specifically against minors. So the fact that we see no consequences for people who are sexual offenders speaks to the kind of society that we come from, where we don't take these kind of crimes seriously. The fact that the prescribed minimum sentence for rape in this country is supposed to be a life sentence. He didn't even serve that minimum 5 years and instead got a 20,000 rand fine. Imagine if someone raped your child and got a 20,000 rand fine, a 15-year-old. It's flabbergasting, the lack of consequence. And I think that his colleagues and the councils that voted him in, especially in a coalition situation, should have had other options. They should have looked to other leaders within their space to say, okay, fine, let's see who else can take up the mantle. But to say that this is what they stand for, this is the best candidate that they can put forward, is really telling about them as a political party, as a coalition government. And it's also telling about the ruling party that is part of that coalition government that also sat down and signed on those summit declarations and signed on that national strategic plan and are showing us that they're basically slapping us in the face.
Now talk to us about the electoral laws in the country, specifically to holding office if you're a convicted criminal. Do we have the right laws in place?
Look, it's not just this particular candidate or candidates that have been wanting in terms of sexual offences or domestic violence cases. We've seen plenty of people that have gone to jail for something as drastic as murder. I mean, we see people who are ex-offenders starting their own complete political parties. I'm Gayton McKenzie, just to mention a few. So it's not, for me, there's something to be said about a country that's comfortable with letting ex-convicts run for office. What are we saying? Are we saying that we believe enough in the correctional services of this country, which we all know is lacking in terms of rehabilitation? Are we saying we believe enough in correctional services to say they've done their work, they've rehabilitated, they can be completely reintegrated into society? I'm all for offenders getting a new life and being able to start from scratch. My thing is, should my vote be contributing towards that? Should I be put in a position whereby my options as a voter are one convict over another? I don't think that that's a fair space to put a voter in. And I think that the IEC should actually put up some kind of barriers to entry for candidates that are submitted by political parties that especially have sexual offenses, especially acts of domestic violence. Because imagine, like, what are we saying? What kind of message are we saying if these are the only political leaders that we have to give to the public? We need to do better. We need to send a strong message. We need to say that there's consequences for being an offender. We need to say that there's consequences for violating people. And we definitely need to say that there's consequences for violating children.
Now, a few months ago, President Cyril Ramaphosa talked about GBV being another pandemic. Now, you said you outlined, I think, a 24-point demands around your expectations. But in my recollection, and I stand to be guided potentially by you, was there a single political party that addressed the issues of GBV in their manifestos?
Look, a couple of them mentioned gender-based violence in their manifestos. They always do. It's kind of, you know, the thing that you do to look cool, to be honest. Because when you look at each political party, right, and we did this prior to the national elections where we kind of assessed them in terms of offenses. Almost all of the political parties, the major political parties, had actually had sexual offenders that they were putting up for national elections. I mean, the DA has sexual offenders, the ANC has sexual offenders, the EFF has an entire convicted rapist as an MP who was part of a rape of a sex worker. You know, so we've seen all of these things sort of like live themselves out, and the very same political parties who say that they stand for GBV will have, for example, like an IFP mayor who decided to sexually assault one of his voters in his vehicle. It takes place. It's normalized. Political parties know that there's no consequences. And until us as the South African people and as the South African voters say, no, we're not going to vote for you if this is what you stand for, I really don't see what future we have. We need to push back. We need to make sure that, again, the IEC doesn't allow people in, that even when we are doing lists for candidates at branch level, etc., that we push back as the owner of this country to say, we know that this person has sexual offenses. Why are they on the list? Why are they representing my political party? We need to start making a stand, and we need to start being a little bit more vocal, because it's clearly the powers that be are only giving lip service to this and are not really implementing it.
Mandisa, you talked about making a number of demands. Have any of those demands been addressed? And can you give us a rundown of one or two of them?
Of course, a couple of the 24 demands have been addressed. One of them was, of course, that we'd have a national strategic plan for gender-based violence, which we do see. Another is that we're currently in the process of drafting legislation for the GBV Council, that will be overseeing the overall GBV response of this country. There's currently a GBV fund that's piloted by the private sector, an interim fund that's waiting for the legislation for the permanent fund. So we're definitely seeing that. We saw the resourcing of the Tutuzela care centers as well as the GBV command center. We saw GBV legislation being enacted and put in place. So there is some moves in the right direction. I'm not saying that absolutely nothing has happened between 2018 and now. A lot is happening. A lot continues to happen. I mean, we see the Generation Equality Forum taking this forward. We see civil society organizations working in collaboration with government in the NSP pillars. So I'm not saying nothing has happened. I am just saying that one of these key asks is that leadership in this country needs to be free of GBV offenses, and we're not seeing that yet. And we need to start seeing these demands being taken seriously at that level. I think it's disrespectful. I think it's disrespectful for the victims and survivors in this country that have to live with looking over their shoulders every single day. We need to start taking this a little bit more seriously. And as a shadow pandemic that GBV is, I don't think we're there yet.
Mandisa Khanyile, thank you so much for your time. She was giving us an update on the situation around GBV and her call that all leaders that are voted into office should be free of GBV crimes.